Yuri Averbakh was born in Kaluga, Russia, on February 8, 1922. He passed away May 7, 2022, at the age of 100, not long ago. He became a grandmaster in 1952. He won the Soviet championship in 54, and that was quite an accomplishment because he beat the likes of Mark Taimanov, he beat Viktor Korchnoi, he finished ahead of Tigran Petrosian, who would later become world champion. He finished ahead of Yefim Geller, Salo Flor, etc., etc., all of the elite Soviet names that we remember as the greats. He also finished equal first in the 1956 Soviet Championship, but then lost in the playoff. But he was Moscow champion in 49, 50, 62. Also won international tournaments in Vienna 1961, Moscow 62, Rio de Janeiro 65. And of course, he was a renowned opening as well as endgame theorist. In fact, we are going to see Averbach's variation in this very game, so buckle your seatbelts. We start with d4, knight f6, c4, g6, the King's Indian defense, knight c3, bishop g7, the normal variation, e4, d6, bishop e2 is the standard development line, castles, and this is Averbach's variation, played by Averbach, bishop g5. So h6 hits the bishop. This is known as the flexible defense. And bishop back to e3. c5, d5 is the advanced variation. e6, and Averbach with h3 here. The book move is queen d2, as indicated there. And pawn takes pawn and pawn takes pawn. King h7, super defending this pawn because of this battery attack. Then h3 gets played. And the most common reply is rook to e8. There is one other line that can be played besides, and it's knight f3, which is the main line. But Averbach with h3 here. E takes d5, e takes d5, and rook e8. Knight f3, bishop f5, pawn g4, hitting the bishop, and bishop e4, pinning the knight to the rook, and Averbach breaks that pin by playing rook g1. I was confused by that move. First of all, I thought he should ignore it and play queen b3. We'll put that up in a moment. But by playing rook g1, you can't castle anymore. And my thought was, well, why not just castle now? Well, as you can see, when you play rook g1, the bot says, yes, castle right here. That gets out of the pin, and your king is where it belongs. Now, what do I get for my idea? I get a check mark for queen b3. Anyway, rook g1 was played, and basically he's saying, I'm going to try to find a way to open up this g file. Queen's knight to d7 here. Right, bishop takes f3. So the idea of bishop takes f3 is to decoy this bishop off of the e-file, and that creates stronger pressure on the e-file against the king, this bishop becoming pinned here. Knight b d7 was played, knight d2, pawn a6, keeping the knight off of b5, and also preparing pawn to b5. g5 is a better move. That vacates this square and also provides access to the h7 square. So, frankly, his bishop can retreat to either of these squares and be perfectly fine. Bobby with a6. Now h4 was played. Of course, that is kind of confirming what we said earlier. He wants to push g5 and try to break things open here. So now b5 was played, and sure enough, g5 here, hitting the knight. Not only does it hit the knight, but it provides a square for this bishop to come to at the right moment. Now, apparently c takes b5 might be better, and g5 can be played on a subsequent turn. But my thought is, on c takes b5, what if knight takes d5, right? Oh, I get inaccurate for that. If knight takes bishop here, knight takes bishop here, that will compel pawn takes knight. I get an exclam for that one. But now notice this pawn can be grabbed with check. forcing the king over. And this knight, well, I can remove the defender of the knight with bishop takes knight on c3, which means he has to take it with his knight, and now that pawn can be grabbed by my rook. I feel okay with this. All right, so there's the c takes b5 line. Although it did not like the idea I had of taking this pawn, it being the annotator. Well, g5 was Yuri's choice, and b4 hits that knight. G takes the knight on f6. That gets a question mark. It does obviously give white material, but it's likely a positional disadvantage, which is why the bot assesses it to be a mistake. So the knight takes the bishop is the simpler and safer way to go. And after knight takes knight, I would say queen to c2 would be played and compel you to take the other knight, etc. Let's go back. G takes f6 was played, and pawn takes the knight on c3. Knight takes the bishop. Note, by the way, that, okay, actually, I was about to say pawn takes bishop is wrong, but the bot says that's the better move. I was literally about to say this is the wrong move. In fact, it gets a question mark. That's hilarious, because here, annotator says, no, the best move is to take the bishop. And I was just about to say that's the wrong move. Oh, now it gets a star. Ficklebot! Ficklebot does it again. Okay, yeah, but now I can actually play pawn takes here. That's winning for black. That's the wrong move for white because it's winning for black. You'd have to blockade and let him win the exchange. And then knight takes. And of course, the queen will grab this pawn. Yeah, it says queen takes. It's the same thing, it's just different. If you play queen takes, then queen takes h4 anyway. And if you play knight f3 hitting the queen, just come back. Ooh, yeah. Come back. Knight takes bishop was played. Rook takes the knight. And here I was interested in pawn takes the pawn as well. And I'm told that's inaccurate. Well, can't be too bad. The eval bar is right dead center. Anyway, rook takes the knight was the move. Now pawn takes the bishop and queen takes the h-man. King over to f1 because, as you can see with this pin, this bishop is undefended, which means this rook can capture. So king f1 breaks the pin on the h4 e1 diagonal. Now c takes b2, and that, I don't see what's wrong with it. It gets a question mark. Well, here Averbakh played rook b1 and offered a draw, and Fischer accepted that draw. And as you can see, the eval bar says it is dead equal.